Hey folks, if you're looking for an in-depth review, you're in the right place. As for the theme of today's episode, I'm going to be nosing around the review copy I received of Michael Joseph's Move 78, a horror-themed hybrid which mashes together visual novels and escape room-style puzzles. But was this title a moving experience, or did it crawl along at a snail's pace? I'm your host Arlyeon, let's find out together. The Botfly Killer. A mysterious murderer whose crimes would seem like the stuff of urban legends, were it not for the trail of bodies left in his wake. A trail which the police seem hard-pressed to follow, even as other, more independently investigative souls pave the way forward. Counted amongst the latter is Sigrid, who finds herself pursuing what seemed like a promising lead. And yet what she finds defies all explanation, as within a matter of moments she is lost, as is the comfort of home. When she recovers, she finds herself in a mysterious facility with no recollection of how she got there. In fact, her memories at large seem splintered, an affliction she soon discovers is shared with the other poor souls who have likewise found themselves stranded in this place. Unsure of who to trust and trapped within a surreal facility, it's all Sigrid can do to try and get to the bottom of this story, piecing together the past of her peers, and surviving the sadistic tasks which emerged as the mysterious overseers begin to take a more active role in the proceedings. And having said all this, I now feel the need to make this abundantly clear. This is not some weird Euphoria-esque scenario. Yes, it's a visual novel. No, it doesn't descend into some perversely traumatizing experience. Also, it's YouTube appropriate. That doesn't stop it from being immensely weird though. I honestly had a bit of difficulty placing how seriously I ought to take things at times, since the game starts with a cold opening that hints at supernatural elements before swapping to Sigrid as a central protagonist in a scenario that feels somewhat more grounded. Or at least as grounded as something can be when it feels like it's trying to play homage to Saw, albeit with a much more literal take on the whole "do you want to play a game" thing. That and a whole sequence where a pair of detectives enter the killer's lair in a flashback. Anyways, it doesn't really take long for things to outright surpass the oddness established in the tutorial, both due to the events within the facility, as well as the added context of the survivors' slowly returning recollections, ultimately building up to an absolutely surreal experience. Yes, a number of the story beats are fairly predictable. That said, Move 78 did manage to surprise me a few times over the course of its run-through, so I'll give it props there. As for its execution, well, the storytelling is essentially divided between lengthy linear storytelling segments as well as smaller slices which are interspersed in the escape rooms and minigames. Whilst this is generally functional, I should mention that there are small bits of the story you can miss out on if you get stumped in one of the minigames and use the skip option. While it isn't a terrible amount of dialogue, it can definitely lead up to some small degrees of confusion at times until the story catches you up, which is a bit of a shame given how dickish some of those minigames can be. Speaking of which, it's about time to talk about the mechanics in Move, and well, I'll admit, whilst I sometimes chafed at some of the novel gameplay segments, I didn't actually mind them too much since they mostly served as the occasional palate cleanser. One of them was Minesweeper, for God's sakes. I love Minesweeper. That said, the real star of the show here was the escape room. See, as you progress through the game, you'll find yourself plunked into a series of self-contained point-and-click puzzles that you can freely roam through. Here's the thing though. While I've certainly covered a fair amount of titles which lean fairly heavily into the basics of bring object A to location B and click on it, that's not what you get here. Rather, Move 78 prides itself on being fairly tough, and each escape room provides a diverse array of conundrums to tackle, ranging from riddles to visual puzzles, logic puzzles, and yes, even a sliding puzzle. It's also varied and honestly rather clever, to the point that I was scouring areas for any sign of something I'd missed while fiddling around with the various mechanisms available. Some of the hints are absolutely devilish. Not that I was wholly left to my own devices either. There are hints in case you get stumped, though the game isn't so kind as to provide you outright solutions. Really, the only mechanic nitpick that I really have is one of the later puzzles in the final chapter janked up for me, and the moment I logged out of the game and logged back in, it let me properly complete it, so As a whole, I have to say it actually does this part quite well. Also, if you're just in it to do escape rooms, you actually do have the menu option that'll let you bypass story elements and choose a particular chapter you want to tackle. Still, whilst definitely fond of the gameplay, I will admit the graphics were a bit more hit and miss for me. There's actually something a bit jarring about the shift in style between the various character portraits, the much more basic style of minigames, and the assets in each of the puzzle rooms. The various jumps in style feel weird, and this is further compounded by the backgrounds used in the novel segments, which at least align with the puzzle rooms, but still feel a bit weird in context. That said, I do feel it's important to say that despite this jarring sensation, I genuinely did appreciate the character art and the overall puzzle room design. While most of the horror they are meant to evoke is fairly muted, there's at least a few good things put here and there. Which brings us to the sound design, incidentally, and overall I'd have to say I was pretty pleased with it for the most part. The soundtrack's quite solid with a number of fun tracks which bring a lot of energy to the experience, no quibbles there. What's more, whilst I felt the horror was a bit lacking on a visual front, there are some small elements in the sound design which certainly help to set a state of unease or implied unpleasantness without lapsing into obnoxious jump scares. That said, I had a harder time with the voice acting, and that was mostly due to Sigrid. See, while every character is voiced, she has some inner monologue moments which are essentially intoned in an identical fashion to her normal lines, which is a bit weird all in all when she is vacillating between the two. In any case, this does bring us to the finale though, and the most important question of all, what does Move 78 mean? No, seriously, if you know, leave a comment in this video because that one never got explained in game. That said, as far as my final rating of the experience goes, well, while the storyline did fail to grasp me at times or start to lean a bit too far into a sort of hokey ridiculousness, I can't fault this game in the slightest for its gameplay. If you're looking for a challenging puzzle game with some light horror theming, this will certainly do. Note that I said theming because if you're going out of your way to find an actually chilling or suspenseful horror game, that's not what you're going to get here, with these elements being more contained to very specific moments or a general gory coat of paint insofar as its world. That said, despite my various nitpicks at the experience, I had absolutely no regrets about my time with the game's mechanics, which is why I can safely call this game a hit. The simple fact is that I never really found puzzles repeating themselves across the various escape rooms. It's honestly something pretty impressive to me, and I had to genuinely rack my brain over these. For that alone, I am absolutely pleased for having gotten the chance to play this game. Anywho, thanks for tuning in. If you agree, disagree, or just have something to say to me, feel free to comment. And if you enjoy my efforts to create new indie reviews, interviews, and gaming content, hit the subscribe button and the bell. For the Discord savvy folks, there's a link to my community, the Crit Hit Cauldron, in the video description, and to my Patreon so you can support me and the other members of Crit Hit. Just as a small aside, I am actually trying to do more for my Patreon in case you subscribe, where there will be previews of videos possibly even weeks ahead of when they're posted. So if you're interested in seeing what I'm currently working on, previews, feel free to pop in and maybe even give suggestions on what I'll tackle next. There's also a Twitch. It's currently a little bit defunct, but I'll probably get back to it eventually. I am just taking a mental health break from it. That said, I'll catch you on the next episode of Crit Hit. Take care till then, folks.